Hello students, Mr. Young here again today. There we go. Today we're talking about Chapter 13, Lesson 3. This lesson is called War with Mexico. So, oh boy, more war. So, I wonder if Mexico knew it was in trouble with the United States next door. They had to know, right? Those darn Americans and their manifest destiny. They swallow up land in North America like an all-consuming horde. They had to know. I'm thinking they had to know. So in the last lesson, we learned that President James Polk finally had Texas admitted into the Union as a state. That, however, was the appetizer. Time for the main course, which is the rest of New Mexico with a side of California. This is how I imagined the U.S. viewed New Mexico and California. The Golden Corral buffet, a smorgasbord, if you will. Alright, a little background, and then the war starts. So in the 1800s, New Mexico contained much more of what, the state of New Mexico does now. It basically was all the land between Texas and California. Like this map will show you, like down here is Mexico, but then all the rest of this, everything except for pretty much Oregon up here and Louisiana Purchase and the Republic of Texas, or the state of Texas now, that was all New Mexico. And the Spanish had inhabited this region really in the 1500s. Spanish conquistadors pretty much rolled in and subdued the native populations. The Spanish founded the city of Santa Fe in 1610. Mexico broke free of Spain in 1821, and this kind of changed things. You see, Spain had worked hard to keep Americans out of, at the time it was New Spain, so basically out of this western area that was theirs. And then Mexico has its own revolution and is no longer a Spanish colony. Now it's Mexico, and they encourage trade. They want Americans coming in to help them populate the area and as well as trade with them. And it turns out this might have been a bit of a mistake. Anyways, they started welcoming trade, and a guy by the name of William Becknell was the first American trader to reach the city of Santa Fe. The trail he blazed from the westernmost edge of the United States at the time to Santa Fe became known as, well, the Santa Fe Trail. Makes sense, right? Anyways, it became a well-known trail and utilized by many Americans that would soon follow after Becknell. This led to American settlers basically creeping in the areas. They started to move in there. And all of a sudden, we've got this idea, you know what? We've been to New Mexico now. Looks like a great place to be. I think we're going to have to manifest destiny. We're going to have to take that. It's destiny for America to have New Mexico. So this is the mindset. Let's walk into California, shall we? Spanish explorers and missionaries set up shop in California in the 1700s. Basically, they built a chain of missions all along that north-south stretch that is California. Now, this is where things get a little hazy because the book glosses over this, so it's going to kind of tell you one thing, and I'm going to tell you another thing. What basically happened with these missions is they enslaved the natives to do agricultural labor under the guise of converting them to Christianity. So it wasn't all happy times. So here are the missionaries, and they're going to teach the savages willingly to become Christians, and then they will farm like the rest of us. No. It was almost like plantation style under the guise of religion. But when you dive into the truth of it, the crimes against natives by the Spanish are comparable to those of the United States. Arguably worse. Arguably. Hard to really quantify that. But they basically would build these missions up and then force the natives to convert to Christianity and work the land for them. It was kind of brutal, and there's lots of books and history on that. But that's more of Spanish and Mexican history, and this is American history. But I wanted you to know that your book glossed over that. It's not really how it went. So The large agricultural missions in Spanish California changed when New Spain became, New Mexico in 1821. The missions became, instead of missions, they became ranchos, basically ranches run by rancheros, ranchers. So I wonder how they pick the vocab sometimes. As it was done before, the natives were essentially still slave laborers. In the 1840s, Americans started reaching California. We said how they started trickling in after the Santa Fe Trail. Well, the Americans found the climate mild and pleasing, and the soil fertile. At this point, you know it is only a matter of time. Americans lock on the fertile soil like flies on garbage. Americans knew that having ports in California on the Pacific Ocean would be pretty sweet as well. That brings us pretty much to the war. Let's get ready to rumble. Okay, so we've got the context here. We like this sweet New Mexico and California. So we're pretty much getting down to fight time. President Polk wanted California and New Mexico for the U.S. This whole idea of manifest destiny was very popular. And if Mexico wouldn't sell it, Polk was determined to take it by force. The trick is getting Mexico to attack first. Before that, though, Polk did try to buy the lands. He offered $30 million for California and New Mexico, but Mexico refused. It said they even refused to discuss the offer. Now, relations between the two countries were already not good. Mexico was still salty over losing Texas, as you may well imagine, and there was a border dispute. Mexico claimed that the Mexican-Texas border was the Nueces River, and the U.S. claimed it was the Rio Grande River, and that meant, here's the Rio Grande, here's the Nueces. That meant this whole chunk of land here, Mexico says it's theirs, U.S. says it's theirs. So what Polk does is he sends the U.S. Army under the leadership of Zachary Taylor into this area. So they think it's their area, and Mexico thinks it's their area, so Mexico sends their army to go deal with the American army that's now parked in the disputed land area. There's an attack, and President Polk basically says they attacked American troops on American soil, and war is declared against Mexico. I guess they're both kind of right, but it is disputed land. And that was a pretty cunning move by President Polk. Mexico took the bait. So war is declared. Here's the game plan of the USA. They have a three-step plan to victory. Number one, drive Mexican forces out of Texas, this disputed area. Seize New Mexico and California, all the rest of it, and then capture Mexico City. So Zachary Taylor and the other general, Stephen Kearny, basically had Texas and New Mexico locked up by 1847. And that leaves California and Mexico City. California was actually a hotspot of problems for Mexico already. Americans in Spanish California, or Mexican California I should call it, had already begun revolting even before the war started, and basically overthrowing the weak Mexican governance. They just didn't have a lot of power there. In April of 1846, Americans in California declared independence and renamed themselves the Bear Flag Republic. They were only the Bear Flag Republic for like a month, though, because then the U.S. Navy arrived and they were like, oh, yeah, hooray, you're part of America now. So they were basically assimilated into the United States very quickly. Unlike Texas, remember, Texas had to wait. But then again, Texas wanted to be a state right away. So at this point, Mexico's in pretty bad shape. Steps 1 and 2 have been accomplished here. But despite this, a number of losses and losses of vast amounts of territory, Mexico refused to surrender, so it's time for step 3, take Mexico City. An American force led by General Winfield Scott landed at the port of Veracruz in Mexico, and essentially in the span of 6 months fought their way from the coast all the way inland to Mexico City, where they then took Mexico City. And that brings us to peace terms. Mexico was forced to surrender on February 2nd, 1848, and they got the short end of the stick because they got their butts kicked. They basically surrendered all the land that the U.S. wanted, which was California, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and even parts of other states. You can see all this in what's called the Mexican Cession right here on the map. And what did Mexico get, you ask? Well, we assumed the $3.5 million in debt they owed to American citizens, so I guess that's nice, and we paid them $15 million essentially like in reparations. Like, we're sorry we kicked your butt. Here's $15 million. Take it. And that's the end of the Mexican War. We basically tricked them into it, and then they took the bait, and then we tossed them around for a while. In the book, you can see the War with Mexico map. It uses digital, and you can see all the battles labeled, and you see that it's almost all American victories. The Mexican army only had one victory in California outside of San Diego. As a result, they didn't do well in the war against us. I would really like to read more about the Mexican War. It's on my list of things to read about, because the textbook doesn't go into too much detail, and I'm sure there's a lot of interesting factoids for us. Alright, you have a simple quiz on the next page, and we're at the 10-minute mark. 11 minutes now. 5 questions, 10 points, 2 attempts. Let me know if you need more. That's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.